for the duration of this afternoon for our meetings to run smoothly. We would want to remind delegates that we have live interpretation into all UN languages, and if you would prefer any language, you have a choice available to you to listen to the proceedings in the language of your choice. And secondly, we do not have a speakers list prepared in advance. When the time for discussions come and the President calls for speakers, you would you have a right then to raise your nameplate, or if you are joining us online, and to send your request to speak via the chat function. Thirdly, the proceedings of today, as well as those of the previous days, are recorded. So the video recordings of the first 2 days of these meetings are already available on the ATT website, and you can observe them at your own spare time. And finally, before introducing the President, we would want to request delegates who would want to see their statements posted on the ATT website to forward such statements via the relevant address, info@thearmstrade.treaty, to the Secretariat, so that we can be able to post them online. And of course, this is voluntary, and of course, if you wish to have your statement posted, please do so. Having concluded the brief announcement and housekeeping rules for this afternoon, I would want to take the opportunity then to introduce the President of the 8th Conference of States Parties, Ambassador Thomas Gubel, who would preside over the proceedings of this afternoon. Mr. President, I'm pleased to introduce you to the meeting. Over to you.
Thank you very much to the Secretariat. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to open this first CSP8 informal preparatory meeting. This meeting forms part of the preparation process for the 8th Conference of States Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty, planned for 22 to 26 of August 2022. At the very outset, I would like to welcome all representatives of ATT state parties, signatory states, other states, civil society and industry to this meeting. I appreciate the effort you have all made to participate in this hybrid meeting organized in the context of constraints imposed upon us by the ongoing pandemic. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to the Vice Presidents, the Management Committee, the chairs and facilitators of the working groups, the chair of the VTF Selection Committee, and the ATT Secretariat for working together in making this meeting possible. Distinguished delegates, you may recall that the 7th Conference of States Parties established an informal preparatory process for CSP8 as a platform for all-inclusive consultations. To streamline this process, the President and the ATT office holders decided on a schedule of ATT meetings for the period leading up to the CSP8. This schedule was formally issued in November 2021 and circulated to the ATT community by the ATT Secretariat. In terms of this schedule, we announced 2 series of preparatory meetings, the working group meetings that have taken place since Tuesday this week, and this very meeting constitute the first series of CSP8 preparatory meetings. The second series of CSP8 preparatory meetings will take place from 26th to 29th of April. Due to constraints presented by the ongoing pandemic, we felt that it would be best for the first series of CSP8 preparatory meetings to be conducted in a hybrid format in order to allow for inclusive participation. However, the hybrid format implies reduced time for our work. So I would like to thank all of you for your understanding and support throughout this period of uncertainty. And I would again ask you to be as concise as possible in your interventions also today in order to respect our tight time schedule. We are all hoping that the meetings in April will then be possible in an in-person format again. As you may be aware, the purpose of preparatory meetings is to create a transparent platform to consult with all state parties and other stakeholders in the run-up to CSP8. We believe that an effective consultation process on CSP8 preparations will help bring about some degree of certainty on the expected outcomes for the forthcoming conference. Distinguished delegates, all documents for the meetings this week were circulated by the ATT Secretariat to all ATT stakeholders and posted on the ATT website in all treaty languages, that is Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. To further improve the level of participation in these meetings, it gives me a pleasure to note that all the working group meetings this week have enjoyed in-session interpretation. A similar arrangement has been made for this meeting. Distinguished delegates, before I turn my attention to the agenda for this meeting, I would like to inform this meeting that the CSP8 presidency has undertaken a number of activities in the area of treaty annualization since coming into office in September 2021. I will brief this meeting about our efforts during our discussion under agenda item 5D. Distinguished delegates, let me now turn my attention to the draft agenda for today, which was circulated as part of documentation for this meeting. We are right in the middle of agenda item 1, the opening of the meeting. Agenda item 2 is during this, I will introduce to you the priority theme for the German presidency on post-shipment controls and outline how we foresee this theme taken forward during the CSP8 cycle. Under agenda item 3, we look at the overview of the implementation of the CSP7 decisions. During this agenda item, I will invite the ATT Secretariat to give us an overview of the status of implementation of the decisions taken by CSP7. Agenda item 4, under this item, the ATT Secretariat will give us an overview of progress made by delegations in achieving gender balance pursuant to a CSP5 decision. Under agenda item 5, during this item, we will receive reports from the ATT subsidiary bodies in terms of how they are progressing with their work. We will start with the voluntary trust fund, followed by the working groups. So after receiving reports from the ATT subsidiary bodies, I propose to amend our agenda slightly by adding an item 5E to focus on the overview presentation by the ATT Secretariat on the status of the ATT finances, including the sponsorship program. This will be then followed by our last item, agenda item 6, which will focus on the proposed draft agenda for the CSP8 meeting. And after exhausting this agenda planned for today, the meeting will conclude. Distinguished delegates, with this explanation, may I take it that the draft agenda for this meeting is adopted as amended slightly in respect of the additional item 5E? Thank you. This is the case. So would any delegation like to take the floor at this time? This does not seem to be the case. So, distinguished delegates, then I would now turn my attention directly to item 2 of our agenda, which is the introduction of the priority theme for the German presidency. Distinguished delegate, having considered the status of the treaty, including areas of progress and areas of challenge, Germany has chosen post-shipment controls as a priority theme during its term of office. Our point of departure was the ATT itself. You know, poorly regulated arms transfers, including their diversion, enable and accelerate conflict and violence, and the ATT intends to build a firewall against this terrible logic in establishing international standards governing arms transfers. So the prevention of the diversion of arms is certainly a key issue when tackling the root causes of armed violence. End-user assurances in arms trade are the legal means introduced, but what is lacking are measures to confirm that they are adhered to or implemented in full. Such measures may include various forms of controls or checks post-shipment, formal assurances by the importing state, reporting requirements on the export, regular screening of reports of possible diversion incidents, including via information exchanges within the ATT and other existing export control regimes, and audits of the exporting entities, to name just a few. So within the framework of CSP8 and for the purposes of the discussions we would like to take further, the term post-shipment controls, PSC, will primarily be used to describe the physical on-site inspection of the respective item by the exporting state after it has been delivered to the final end user. We are fully aware that this may raise concerns with some states parties, as national legislation may just not allow for these inspections by external entities. This instrument is indeed requiring close cooperation by the exporting and the importing state, as it touches most sensitive areas. A whole range of issues needs to be discussed and agreed upon in advance, starting with legal requirements and preconditions down to operational challenges. Let me assure you that we do not intend to define ATT-related procedures that would run against national legislation. But we deem this issue most relevant for the ATT and think that it will gain more relevance in the future in our common efforts to tackle diversion. We know that there are diverging views on the introduction of mechanisms of control, but at the same time, there are promising experiences with them. An intensified exchange between state parties is the appropriate means to explore common understandings and identify the best way forward. Let me take this opportunity to encourage you to participate actively in this process, a process that should extend well beyond CSP8 and help to explore new standards in the trading of arms. Germany will start this exchange with 2 workshops on PSC in the run-up to CSP8. The underlying aim is to provide further information on the scope of end-user controls for importing and exporting states, and to offer effective recommendations for states interested in introducing PSCs. We would like to work on a set of measures and necessary steps that will allow states who wish to do so to ask the right questions and prepare the necessary structures before considering the implementation of post-shipment controls. So the first workshop took place on Tuesday afternoon, and we saw a vivid exchange on the issue then. Unfortunately, we did not have enough time to really touch all the relevant aspects and discuss the questions raised. But building on this very positive experience, we will further develop the scope of the second workshop, scheduled in the margins of the second preparatory week in April. The second workshop will certainly benefit also from the input of institutions and organizations of the civil society to provide an encompassing overview. The result of the two workshops will then serve as a basis for a paper, perhaps a handbook, summarizing the discussions, highlighting important aspects that need to be considered with regard to PSC, and to offer a kind of guidance to all states parties which might consider introducing PSC in one way or the other. We will present this paper in time for the CSP8 thematic discussion in August. Distinguished delegates, after this explanation, I would like now to open the floor for delegations' views on the outline of the priority theme. I just described the priority theme of the German presidency, so the floor is open. I see the distinguished delegate of the European Union. Please, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. And at your request, I will briefen this statement, EU statement, slightly so we can try and keep to our time. The full text will be available on the website of the ATT Secretariat. Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union, the candidate countries, the Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, and potential candidate Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the EFTA countries Iceland and Norway, as well as Georgia, align themselves with this statement. First of all, let me congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Arms Trade Treaty and assure you of the EU's full support and active contribution to the preparation of the 8th Conference of States Parties to be held in August 2022 in Geneva. We welcome your decision to organize this preparatory meeting in a hybrid setting, and we express our hope that circumstances will allow the remaining working group and preparatory meetings, as well as the conference itself, to be held fully in person. The EU continues to support outreach activities to third countries, helping those in setting up arms export control systems and promoting the universalization, implementation, and transparent reporting under the ATT. The EU and its member states fully support the objectives of the treaty and will continue to do their utmost to promote its universalization and full effective implementation. We thank Germany for its focus on efforts towards universalization of the treaty, and furthermore, we support your initiative to take stock of all achievements and progress, as well as shortcomings in the treaty implementation. It is important to have a clear direction for our future work. The focus on on-site verification and post-shipment control during your presidency also resonates very well with the treaty principles and represents further efforts in confidence building. The EU will fully support you to achieve concrete outcomes at the 8th Conference of State Parties. Finally, the European Union recalls that a solid financial foundation for the ATT is indispensable for its institutional stability. We would therefore welcome an update on the financial arrangements agreed last year. We once again urge all states that have not yet done so to pay their dues in full and on time and to settle their outstanding arrears without further delay. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate of the European Union. I would now give the floor to the representative of Ireland, followed by China. So, Ireland, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. With your indulgence, I'll also briefly touch upon some general aspects of the ATT, as well as your thematic focus. Ireland aligns itself with the statement made by the EU and would like to offer the following remarks in a national capacity. Ireland welcomes the ongoing efforts by the Presidency and the Secretariat to ensure that the work on the universalization and effective implementation of the ATT continues despite the challenges posed by the pandemic. Ireland looks forward to participating in advancing this important work at this preparatory meeting and the working group meetings throughout the year. Ireland remains committed to the universalization of the ATT. We call on all states parties to redouble their efforts in promoting universalization. International standards are strongest when they are universally applied and effectively implemented. The ATT is a crucial part of a comprehensive international regime that, when fully universally and implemented, will support peace, stability, security, and development. Ireland recognizes that many states parties continue to experience difficulties meeting their ATT reporting obligations, including due to a lack of capacity and resources, internal coordination challenges, and difficulties in conducting technical assessments. Ireland is concerned by the ongoing low rate of compliance with reporting obligations, and we remain fully committed to working collectively and finding solutions to overcome challenges in reporting by states parties. In this regard, Ireland strongly supports the updated reporting template endorsed at CSP7, prepared by the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting, and we support the proposed amendments to the FAQ-style document. These templates can help address confusion on certain aspects of reporting, bringing more clarity to the process and facilitating greater transparency by states parties. Ireland recalls that the ATT is the first arms regulation treaty to recognize a link between conventional arms transfers and gender-based violence. It mandates that gender-based violence be considered in the course of an export risk assessment. Its effective implementation can contribute to eliminating violence against women and girls, as set out in Sustainable Development Goal Target 5.2. As states parties, we should discuss ways in which the outcomes of the 5th Conference of States Parties, which focused on gender and gender-based violence, can be better implemented throughout the treaty going forward. As such, we welcome the focused work on gender and GBV in the sub-working group on Articles 6 and 7, and the working group on transparency and reporting. Also in this vein, Ireland welcomes the President's initiative to begin a review process that will take stock of the achievements of the treaty since its entry into force 8 years ago, as well as its potential, in order to identify ways in which to improve the ATT's overall effectiveness. Finally, Ireland looks forward to engaging in the Diversion Information Exchange Forum, which is well positioned to become a valuable mechanism for states to combat arms diversion through sharing concrete and operational information about cases of suspected or detected diversion. We share the EU's hope that the DIF will take into account the valuable contribution that can be made by civil society in this forum. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Ireland for his statement. And now I give the floor to China, followed by Mexico. So China, please, you have the floor.
谢谢主席先生给我发言的机会。首先，中方再次祝贺德国大使戈贝尔阁下当选武器贸易条约第8届缔约国大会主席，赞赏主席及条约秘书处克服疫情困难，为此次筹备会及相关工作组会做出的周到安排。我的发言将会非常简短。自2020年7月正式加入武器贸易条约以来，中方忠实履行条约义务，全面参加各项会议讨论，及时缴纳会费，积极参与国际交流与合作，按时提交国家履约出事报告。中方高度重视防止武器非法转用问题，支持加强对武器出口各环节的有效管理，对将交付后管控问题作为本年度会议主题持开放态度，欢迎主席就此提出的概念文件，并召开相关研讨会。中方呼吁各国不向非国家行为体出售武器，强化负责任武器贸易理念，防止武器被非法转用。中方支持加强条约普遍性和有效性，呼吁各国积极开展国际合作与援助，特别是要帮助发展中国家加强履约能力建设，同时积极开展外联活动，不断吸引更多的国家加入条约，为打击非法武器贸易争取更多支持。中方呼吁尚未批约或入约的国家，特别是武器出口大国，尽快加入条约。当前新冠肺炎局势仍不容乐观，条约缔约国大会筹备工作面临一定挑战和不确定性。中方愿与各方一道，共同推动召开一次务实高效的缔约国大会， 全面审议条约执行情况，制定合理可行的工作方案，进一步增强条约的普遍性和有效性。谢谢主席。
I thank the distinguished delegate from China for his statement. And next on my list is Mexico, followed by France. So please, Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Buenas tardes tengan todos ustedes. Señor presidente, me dio muchísimo gusto conocerlo ayer personalmente y le agradezco esa recepción. Embajador Thomas Gobel, presidente de la 8ª Conferencia de los Estados Partes del Tratado sobre el Comercio de Armas. México celebra la realización de las reuniones de los grupos de trabajo y de la primera reunión preparatoria informal de la 8ª Conferencia de los Estados Parte, que, si bien hemos realizado en formato híbrido debido a las complicaciones persistentes por la situación de la pandemia, demuestra el interés de los Estados Parte y demás actores interesados en el avance sustantivo de los preparativos hacia la conferencia y, por lo tanto, son una muestra de la confianza en la consolidación del régimen del tratado. Mi delegación reitera su llamado a que la flexibilidad del formato de realización de estas reuniones no debe traducirse en limitantes o justificaciones para cerrar espacios al acompañamiento y a la participación sustantiva de las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, expertos de la academia, el sector privado y otros organismos internacionales. Asimismo, y en preparación de las próximas reuniones preparatorias hacia la conferencia, mi delegación desea expresar el más firme compromiso de México como vicepresidencia de la conferencia para seguir promoviendo las prioridades y las preocupaciones de la región de América Latina y el Caribe en el ámbito del régimen del tratado. Como hemos indicado en distintos momentos durante las conferencias de las partes previas, las armas pequeñas y ligeras son de especial relevancia para México, ya que su desvío y tráfico ilícito constituyen un flagelo que afecta profundamente a nuestro país, así como a toda la región de América Latina y el Caribe y a las subregiones del continente americano. Las consecuencias del desvío y del tráfico ilícito de armas son múltiples e intersectoriales y comprenden desde la vulneración de la cohesión social y de las oportunidades de desarrollo de las personas hasta la afectación a la infraestructura gubernamental, llegando incluso a representar una pérdida de ingreso por las afectaciones al comercio y al turismo como resultado de la violencia armada. En los trabajos rumbo a la conferencia, continuaremos llamando la atención sobre estas deplorables consecuencias, además de promover una necesaria concientización y deliberación sobre los terribles costos que también generan las prácticas irresponsables y negligentes de la industria del comercio de armas, reiterando la necesidad de abordar este problema desde el enfoque de las víctimas y en especial de las mujeres y niñas que se han visto afectadas por la violencia por armas. Del mismo modo, el Gobierno de México continuará llamando también a la generación de sinergias y de complementariedades desde el ATT con otros instrumentos jurídicos y foros internacionales y regionales relacionados con la prevención del desvío del comercio de armas. Para concluir, señor presidente, mi delegación desea dar la bienvenida al tema prioritario propuesto por el presidente de la conferencia, relacionado con los controles y las verificaciones posteriores a las transferencias de armas. Reconoceremos que esta es un área de trabajo relevante que contribuirá a nuestros esfuerzos para prevenir y combatir el desvío y el tráfico ilícito de armas, por lo que le agradecemos a Alemania por la oportunidad de participar en el taller para Estados partes del ATT sobre controles y verificaciones posteriores al envío. Y esperamos participar nuevamente en el próximo taller sobre esta temática durante la próxima ronda de reuniones preparatorias en el mes de abril. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
I thank the ambassador of Mexico for her statement and for the continuous engagement in the priority theme of the presidency. Next speaker on my list is France. So please, France, you have the floor.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Nous vous remercions pour la présentation des priorités de votre présidence pour cette 8e conférence des États parties au traité sur le commerce des armes. Et nous saluons votre proposition de retenir comme thème prioritaire de nos échanges cette année les contrôles post-livraison. Nous vous remercions également, ainsi que la Suisse, pour l'excellent atelier que vous avez organisé mardi, qui était très enrichissant, et nous nous réjouissons de pouvoir participer au prochain atelier. La prévention et la lutte contre le trafic d'armes classiques est l'un des 2 piliers de ce traité. Comme vous le savez, la France s'est tout particulièrement investie pour que la lutte contre le détournement des armes classiques légalement transférées soit l'un des axes d'effort prioritaires des travaux qui sont menés dans le cadre du groupe de travail dédié à la mise en œuvre du traité. Le détournement peut avoir lieu à n'importe quel moment du cycle de vie d'une arme, que ce soit lors d'un transfert, au cours de la chaîne d'approvisionnement ou après la livraison. Si le traité sur le commerce des armes ne comporte pas de mesures spécifiques en matière de contrôle post-livraison, ceux-ci peuvent, au même titre que d'autres mesures, contribuer à atténuer le risque de détournement. Plusieurs mesures peuvent être mises en œuvre en phase post-livraison. On peut citer à cet égard les déclarations d'arrivée à destination, les certificats de vérification de livraison ou encore l'imposition de mesures relatives à la réexportation. Des contrôles post-livraison peuvent également être effectués au sein même des États exportateurs. La France, par exemple, met en œuvre un contrôle a posteriori. Donc, ce contrôle consiste dans la vérification du respect par un industriel de ses obligations en matière de commerce des armes, notamment pour ce qui concerne les conditions assorties aux licences délivrées. Il s'agit d'un contrôle sur pièce et sur place qui peuvent donner lieu, le cas échéant, à l'établissement d'un procès-verbal et qui peuvent conduire à des mises en demeure ou à des sanctions. Enfin, il peut être mis en œuvre des mesures de vérification sur site dans le pays de destination finale. Ce type de mesure est très difficile à mettre en œuvre concrètement, notamment parce que ça nécessite la mobilisation de ressources humaines disposant d'une réelle expertise et mobilisables pour effectuer ces visites dans beaucoup d'États, alors qu'ils n'en ont pas nécessairement, ils ne disposent pas nécessairement de ces ressources humaines. En outre, il nous semble important de rappeler qu'un contrôle post-livraison sur site implique l'accord préalable explicite de l'État importateur. Monsieur le Président, la France se tient prête à échanger sur cette question dans le cadre du processus intersessionnel en amont de la 8e conférence des États parties qui se tiendra en août. Et nous vous remercions à nouveau pour vos efforts. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie le délégué de la France pour cette intervention. This concludes my list of speakers. So we have Ghana. So we have Ghana. Ghana, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. First of all, I would like to applaud your priority areas that you have set that will form the focus of your presidency. We welcome particularly the focus on post-shipment controls and wish to communicate Ghana's readiness to work with you in this regard. We are optimistic that the methodology that you have announced to address this particular focus area would yield the required outcome. Furthermore, we support the review of implementation agenda that you have set, and we also be welcoming and be ready to hear and look forward to a good outcome. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Ghana for his statement. And with this, I think this concludes my list of speakers now. Would any other delegation like to take the floor at this time? This does not seem to be the case. So, distinguished delegates, so I would now proceed to item 3 of our agenda. At this stage, I would like to invite the head of the ATT Secretariat to give us an overview of the implementation of the CSP7 decisions. Please, Dimizami, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I extend my greetings to Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. As indicated by the President, I'm tasked with the responsibility of providing an overview of the implementation of the decisions taken by the last conference, which is CSP7. You recall that CSP7 was held last year in these very same premises in a hybrid format over the period 30 August to the 3rd of September 2021 in a hybrid format. There were specific decisions that were made by conference, and what I intend to do then in the next few minutes is to reflect the progress that has been made towards the implementation of these decisions. To facilitate the work of the ATT during the CSP8 cycle, conference had decided to appoint specific office holders or bearers. And of course, you remember that the president was elected by the conference, CSP8 president, as well as the vice presidents of CSP8. And in addition to that, CSP7 also appointed the management committee comprising of 5 representatives who are representing 5 regional groups for a period of 2 years. All these office holders are in office at the present moment, and it is our understanding that they are hard at work. You'll be reminded that the CSP7 presidency, Sierra Leone, had pursued a priority theme for the CSP7 cycle, which was in respect of small arms and light weapons and stockpile management. And there were recommendations that were submitted to conference by the president of conference last year regarding this topic. And some of the decisions that were made by conference then relates to calling upon the utilization of tools that have been developed by other instruments, may they be regional or international, to address the question of illicit trade in conventional arms, as well as stockpile management and security. So our understanding is that with respect to this particular decision, all stakeholders who are relevant to this aspect are working on these tools, and they are being used for treaty implementation at a national level. So this we register as work in progress. The conference also decided that as a recommendation submitted, that the WICETI, meaning the Working Group on Effective Treaty Implementation, is to formalize discussions concerning the post-delivery cooperation. And what we register as progress against this particular decision is that, as you'll be aware, the Article 11 sub-working group has got a multi-year work plan, and part of the work plan therefore provides for discussions on post-delivery cooperation. And we're expecting that particular sub-working group to be delivering on this aspect, or deliberating on this aspect during the April meeting. And as already the president of CSP8 had recently just introduced his priority theme in respect of PSC, and some elements of the PSC would also probably refer to issues of post-delivery cooperation between states. And I think the sharing of information on effective and management of stockpiles was also a decision that was made by conference. And again, we register this as a work in progress by various stakeholders. And under this topic, there was also a decision by conference tasking the working group on effective treaty implementation, as well as the Secretariat, to actually identify and compile a list of assistance programs available to states parties. And what we are doing to implement that decision is that we, as the Secretariat, we have a project that we are undertaking to actually establish a database that will match resources as well as requests. And we are happy to indicate that the EU was generous enough to give us some support, financial support towards that end. So we are hopeful that as a consequence of this project, we are going to take forward the decision of CSP7 with regard to the database and programs of assistance to states. You'll also be reminded that during the same conference, Argentina had submitted a working paper on matters related to transparency and information exchange. And there were quite a number of recommendations that were made. But I summarize here that they were largely calling for an active use of initiatives to enhance transparency and information exchange in addressing diversion. And those would include, amongst others, the Diversion Information Exchange Forum, as you'll be aware, known shortly as DIF, the use of our national points of contact, as well as the use of the information exchange platform as established and embedded on the ATT website. And of course, the other one is about post-delivery cooperation initiatives between exporters and importers and discussions around that. So we are of the view that this is work in progress, and the initiatives that are indicated on the left of the slide are currently taking forward this decision of the conference. So state parties as well as other stakeholders are actually using these mechanisms to ensure that we push back on illicit trade as well as diversion. In the area of the working groups, the ATT working groups, there are quite a number of decisions made by the previous conference. But with respect to the working group on effective treaty implementation, conference noted the areas of work that this working group was going to take forward in this current cycle. And you'll be aware that the work of WIGETI, as we call it in summary, is actually set out in the multi-year work plans of those particular sub-working groups. So to take forward, therefore, that work, there's a program of work that has been set for those sub-working groups in this year. And during the course of this week, there were quite lengthy discussions of the sub-working groups trying to take forward the program of work as noted by conference last year. And also conference endorsed a paper submitted by the Article 11 sub-working group facilitator, Sabia at the time, outlining elements of a process of assessing the risk of diversion. And that paper is currently published on the ATT website as a tool of reference by states parties in their endeavor to implement the ATT. But also as important was the decision by conference to endorse the revised initial as well as annual reporting templates, and recommended such templates for use by states in submitting their reports. These templates are currently on the website and they are being used by states. But we are hopeful, therefore, that as we are approaching the next deadline for the submission of annual reports on the 31st of May, 2022, excuse me, we will see a number of states using these templates because they help us to be as comprehensive as possible in reporting on the transfers conducted in a year under review. But finally, under the working groups, there was an endorsement by CSP of the agenda items, standing agenda items of the working group on transparency and reporting, and tasks that will be carried out by that working group. And again, during the week on yesterday, to be specific, I think, the working group on reporting has been working and discussing and taking forward those tasks that were assigned to it by the working group. But we note, Mr. President, over here that, of course, this work cannot drive itself. So there are working group chairs and facilitators who are appointed to move this work forward, and I think this portfolio of work is moving forward in a very progressive way, and I think we are grateful, therefore, to the efforts of the working group chairs and facilitators in taking this responsibility. You'll be reminded again that the Diversion Information Exchange Forum, which was a subject of a decision by the last conference, was actually established by the Conference of States Parties, CSP8, to be specific, when the adoption of the terms of reference actually happened. But the CSP7 then, conscious of the fact that the first formal meeting of this forum had not taken place, had again tasked or mandated the current president to organize the first meeting of DIF. Well, of course, it's important, therefore, that in organizing the meeting, the president needs to be alive to the circumstances that will allow for broad in-person participation, because the terms of reference of this forum require that the meetings should be in person. And if they're in person, so if there are restrictions of traveling, restrictions of meeting and otherwise, that had made it impossible to organize the first meeting of this forum. What we are registering, therefore, is something that we are planning. We are hopeful, as the president and the secretariat and the chair of this forum, that a possibility exists for the first meeting to happen during CSP8 in April. We are hopeful that as the measures of COVID, the COVID measures are starting to be relaxed, they will provide an opportunity for the forum to actually have its first meeting. But conference last year also decided to defer the review of the usefulness of the DIF to the first CSP following 2 cycles. And I think this was to accommodate the reality that DIF had not been able to meet as expected. So we're trying to defer that or to move it to the right. But this is a matter that is pending. Under the management committee, there were specific decisions that were taken by conference, and one of them was conference adopted the guidelines for making financial arrangements under Financial Rule 81D. And I think many delegates will be aware of that. And that is a financial rule that requires states parties or states that are in arrears for 2 or more years to make financial arrangements with the Secretariat. So these guidelines are actually setting the process that would be used in setting up those arrangements as well as payment plans. In order to assist states in taking advantage of this possibility, we have therefore elaborated an application procedure that states can use, and that procedure is available or is posted on the ATT website. But unfortunately, I wish to mention that up to date, we have not yet received any application by any state that is in arrears seeking to make use of this possibility. But also, under the management committee, there was a decision made by conference to reappoint the PricewaterhouseCoopers, who is or who are the independent auditors of the ATT Secretariat for a period of 4 years. And that is part of our internal control system in place to ensure that we are able to account properly. So to take forward this decision of conference, we have already established a framework of engagement between ourselves as a Secretariat as well as the auditors to ensure that all the financial work streams of the Secretariat are audited in good time. The last 2 slides, in summary, Mr. President, is to indicate that there was a decision to adopt the conference, to adopt the budget for the 2022 financial year. And the Secretariat is implementing this budget according to the rules of finance as adopted by conference at CSP2. And we continue to apply fiscal discipline in ensuring that we are able to get as much value from every dollar that we have at our disposal. The last slide is about CSP8 decisions CSP7 decision relating to meetings this year. The next CSP8 is supposed to take place on the 22nd to the 26th of August 2022. And also conference had directed that we must have informal preparatory meetings. And this meeting is one of those, and the next one will be in April. Mr. President, this is the overview of the implementation of the decisions taken by CSP7. I thank you for your attention.
I would like to thank the Secretariat for this comprehensive and structured overview. I think perhaps this is also the moment to once again thank all the office holders and also Secretariat for the engagement to keep our treaty running and working, and I think this is the case. I would now like to open the floor for delegations' views on the status of implementation of CSP7 decisions. So the floor is open. This does not seem the case. So then I would like to thank once again the head of the ATT for this overview. And with this, distinguished delegates, with your permission, I would like to move to item 4 of our agenda. I invite again the ATT Secretariat to give us an overview of progress made by delegations in achieving gender balance in ATT meeting pursuant to a CSP5 decision. So again, I think this time it's Sarah, so please, the Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. This presentation will be delivered by Ms. Sarah Parker, the Senior Policy Officer at the Secretariat. I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and Mr. Dadla. So, good afternoon, everyone. As many of you will recall, the 5th Conference of States Parties decided that the Secretariat should report to CSPs on overall progress among delegations in achieving gender balance, and this is in paragraph 22 of the final report. So in accordance with the mandate given to the Secretariat by CSP5, we have prepared this presentation to give stakeholders an overview of the progress made among delegations in achieving gender balance. This is the first time we're giving such a presentation since receiving the mandate in 2019. This is due to a couple of factors, including the fact that there was no meeting for CSP6 and ATT meetings since CSP5 have been reduced in terms of the time, thanks to COVID, and also the need to hold meetings in virtual or hybrid format. This has led to shorter agendas and less space, if you like, for this discussion. However, we felt that it was important and timely to deliver this report. So I'm going to start with a bit of background information on the mandate given to the Secretariat, followed by a brief description of the methodology before I launch into the findings of our analysis. So the President's theme for CSP5 was gender and gender-based violence. And the conference made a series of decisions in the context of this theme. And this included a decision that states parties, signatory and observer states attending ATT working groups, preparatory meetings and CSP itself should strive for gender balance in their delegations. Secondly, it was decided that the Secretariat should report to CSPs on overall progress among delegations in achieving gender balance. So CSP5 tasked states with striving for gender balance in their delegations and mandated us to report on progress towards this goal. In approaching this task, we've unpacked the different elements of the mandate in the following ways. In terms of progress, an assessment of progress suggests starting from a particular baseline or a point in time, namely a specific CSP, and monitoring whether the thing that is being assessed, in this instance gender balance, has moved towards an improved condition in subsequent conferences. In terms of delegations, what do we mean by delegations? Well, CSP5 only tasked states with striving to achieve gender balance in their delegations. So technically, we're only asked to report on states' progress. But in fact, for this analysis, we've looked at all delegations participating in ATT meetings or CSPs, including civil society and organizations, and not just states. And finally, what do we mean by gender balance? Well, the interpretation we've given to the term gender balance is that it refers to the equal representation of women and men within and among delegations, and equal representation of men and women as heads of delegations within delegations. So a little bit on the methodology. In terms of the sources of data, obviously we've relied on the online registration records that are in place, and we've had online registration since CSP5, as well as lists of participants that are produced for each state, Conference of States parties. We also need to note some of the parameters with respect to the data that we have available to us and what we will be analysing. Firstly, formal registration is only required for conferences. This is partly due to the rules of procedure as well as the financial rules. Registration has exceptionally been required for some preparatory meetings, including this one, where it's necessary, for example, because we're using a venue where people need to be registered in order to have access. So, for example, when we have meetings in UN buildings, we need to give them a list of people that will be entering. But it's not always required for prep meetings, and the preference is that we don't require registration in an effort to keep such meetings informal and open in nature. So, although CSP5 directed states to strive for gender balance at working group meetings, preparatory meetings, and conferences, we have only got registration records, complete registration records for conferences in terms of who and how many people attended. So we're only going to be reporting on gender balance achieved or not at conferences of states parties. Secondly, we were given the mandate to report on gender balance by CSP5 in 2015. So our starting point for analysis is CSP5 itself, and we'll be looking at trends occurring after that conference. So we start with CSP5 in 2019. Since there was no meeting for CSP6, which was held through written procedure, it covers two conferences, CSP5 and CSP7. So I'm now going to move to the findings. And here I'll be looking at three main categories. Gender balance in terms of the total number of delegates that attended a CSP, gender balance within delegations that attended a CSP, and gender balance with respect to the heads of delegation. So starting with gender balance among the total number of delegates in attendance, in this slide on the chart on the right, you can see statistics for CSP5. Oh, it's left. Sorry. So the first two columns show the number of representatives of states that were male in blue and the number that were female in orange. So there were a total of 419 state delegates registered for CSP5. 253 of them were men, about 60%, and 166 were women, that's about 40%. I will be showing percentages in a moment. So at the moment we're looking at absolute numbers. In the middle column, you see the statistics for representatives of organizations. That includes regional organizations as well as international organizations. So there were 34 representatives of organizations registered for CSP5. 15 of them were men and 19 of them were women. And in the final columns, you see the statistics for representatives of civil society organizations. This includes non-government organizations and industry representatives. There were 190 civil society representatives registered for CSP5. 100 were men, that's 53%, and 90 were women. If we then take a look at CSP7, again, we have states in the first two columns, organizations in the middle, and civil society in the last two columns. So what's perhaps most interesting here is that there is a big increase in the number of state representatives registered for the meeting. So 519 state delegates in total, which is 100 more than for CSP5. One can speculate that this is probably a consequence of CSP7 being held as a hybrid meeting, enabling more people to participate remotely worldwide. In terms of gender, there was an increase in the proportion of males, with 337 state representatives being male, that's 65%, and 182 being female, which is a 5% difference from CSP5. If we look at this information in percentage terms, we see that in CSP5, 40% of state delegates were women, while 35% were women at CSP7. For organizations, the proportion of female delegates dropped from 56% to 49%, and for civil society, it was steady at 47% women for both meetings, CSP5 and CSP7. If we now take a look at gender balance among state delegates by region, for CSP5, it looks like this. So for African delegates registered for CSP5, 76% were men and 24% were women. The Americas, Asia, and Europe all had the same distribution. 58% delegates were men, 42% were women. And for Oceania, 28% of delegates were men and 72% were women. For CSP7, we can see that the proportion of female delegates from Africa increased from 24% to 30%, but for all other regions, female participation went down. Moving on now to look at gender balance within delegations. Starting with states, excuse me, this graph shows us that at CSP5, for 43% of delegations, at least 50%, or half, of the delegates within these delegations were women. 57% of the delegations had fewer than 50% women. At CSP7, this dropped to 37%, so only 37% of state delegations were at least half the delegates were women. If we have a look at organizations, which will be in red, for CSP5, 62.5% of delegations had more than 50% female delegates. And I should note we are talking about 8 delegations here, so it's not a huge number of organizations that attended. And for CSP7, this went down to 43%. Finally, for civil society, delegations registered for CSP5, 47% had 50% or more females. And in CSP7, this decreased to 41%. So for all the groups, states, organizations, and civil society, we see a decline in the number of delegations that had 50% or more women. I should just point out, we're not sort of suggesting that this is what CSP has asked states, CSP5, has asked states to strive for in terms of the delegation. You're not needing to have more than 50%, but we thought this was an interesting piece of information. On the next slide, we've pulled out some more specific figures, namely how many state delegations had no female delegates, how many had exactly 50% and were perfectly balanced, arguably, and how many only had female delegates, so 100% women. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of text in the box, in the table. I was conscious when we were doing this that we were focusing on women and we weren't really mentioning men. But of course, if we're talking about gender participation, we do have to mention both. So no women means 100% men, 50% women means 50% men, 100% women means no men. And obviously those delegations with no men and 100% women, no women or no men, are at the extreme of not achieving gender balance. So if we have a look at CSP7, we see that there are 25 delegations that had no women, which was 25%. 12 delegations had exactly 50% women, 12%, and 8 delegations had 100% women or no men. I think it's worth, this figure of 50% is perhaps the most key or relevant when we're considering the directive of CSP5 for states to strive for gender balance in their delegations. One challenge with this figure, of course, is that some delegations only have one delegate. So it's a bit hard to achieve gender balance when you only have one representative. And of course, other delegations have an odd number of delegates. Maybe they've got 3, maybe they've got 5. So again, you can't achieve 50-50 representation. So maybe rather than looking at gender balance in a strict sense of meaning half or 50-50, a better approach might be to look at how many delegations have been 40 to 60% women as a measure of gender balance. So this is something I think we need to think about for next time or moving forward with this report. I'm now going to move on to the information for organisations and civil society. In the interest of time, and because there weren't so many organisations involved, I'm going to focus on the civil society figures. So for CSP5, there were 38 delegations that had no women, which is 45%. There were 8 delegations that had 50% women and 50% men, which was 9%, and 26 delegations, or 31%, that had female delegates only and no male delegates. For CSP7, the number of civil society delegations with no females at all increased to 55%, while the number of all female delegations decreased to 25%. The final category I'm going to show you is heads of delegation. So how many heads of state delegations and heads of organisations were male and how many were female? I should just mention that civil society organisations don't generally appoint a head of delegation, so this is why they're not included here. And also the number of heads of delegation doesn't match the total number of delegations in all instances because not all delegations, including states, nominate a head of delegation. So in CSP5, 53 state delegations had a male head of delegation and 31 had a female. For CSP7, the number and proportion of male heads of delegation rose to 70, and the number of female heads of delegation decreased to 30. For organisations, there was a smaller shift. There were more female heads of delegation in CSP5 than male heads, but this reversed in CSP7. On the final slide, we give an overview of the heads of delegation of state delegations by region. So at CSP5, 39% of the heads of delegation from Africa, the Americas, and Europe were women. 21% of heads of Asian delegations were women, and 67% of delegations from Oceania were women. For CSP7, the percentage of African heads of delegation who were female decreased to 24%. It rose for the Americas to 40%, reduced slightly in Asia to 20%, and reduced to 27% for Europe, and rose to 100% for Oceania. So I'm conscious that there is a lot of information in the slides, and you won't have had a chance to process all of that in the time that we've had to present it. We will, of course, make the slides available online, and we do invite you to have a closer look. And I apologize if it was a bit rushed, but we do have a small space of time, and there is an awful lot of information that we could have put up there. Now, this is the first time that we're presenting the information. We've tried to highlight the areas that we think best illustrate whether states and others are achieving gender balance in their delegations. Our plan is to deliver this presentation, this report, to all stakeholders in the first meeting after each CSP. So that'll be the first prep meeting. This will allow us to include statistics from the most recent CSP, and it will also give delegations time to make greater efforts to achieve gender balance in their delegations for the next conference, which is still some months away. So in conclusion, the aim of the exercise was to answer the question, have states met their CSP5 commitment to strive for gender balance in their delegations? And I think the answer is clearly not so far. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank the Secretariat, Ms. Parker, for her very informative and clear report. And with this, I would like to open the floor for delegations' views on the report and the status of gender participation in the ATT meetings. So the floor is open. This does not seem to be the case at the moment. I understand that was, as the Secretary just, Sarah said, it was a lot of information. I think we all have to digest that, and it has also shown that there's still work before us in this regard, but yeah, let's all have a close look on that. Sorry, there is YLPF has asked for the floor, so please, you have the floor. Is this good? It's yeah, online. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much, President. We would like to welcome first the update delivered today by the ATT Secretariat, providing for the first time really an overview of progress amongst delegations in achieving gender balance. And as the President has said, we are also still processing what we just heard. It was a lot of information, but we would like to provide some initial reactions. Just to also say that for many years, WILF has also noted the gender of those delivering statements in the tracking of statements on our website. And this tracking is not perfect, and especially lately, this has become more difficult as more states have submitted written submissions rather than oral ones. But just to note that we also have this information available on our website. In terms of the results presented, we really welcome the detailed disaggregation of data, including providing information about gender balance of heads of delegations. We regret, of course, that women's participation has dropped from CSP5 to CSP7, and the results clearly show that more work needs to be done, and we welcome this exercise as an important tool to improve gender equality in the future. And Ms. Parker's presentation included some good observations about possible causes and factors affecting gender balance that we will also think more about. We would like to reiterate that it's not just about adding more women, but it's also about ensuring women's meaningful participation and to ensure women's leadership, for example, ensuring that women are head of delegations. This agenda item is a clear follow-on from decisions taken at the 5th Conference of States Parties as to other activities currently underway in the Working Group on Effective Treaty Implementation and the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. And we would like to also reiterate Ireland's calls to continue working on finding ways to implement all CSP5 decisions on gender more effectively in the work going forward. And in this vein, we're really looking forward to working together with Control Arms on developing and implementing a methodology to track ongoing progress with CSP5 gender recommendations. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank the representative of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom for this statement, and I think this concludes my list of speakers. So, is there any demand for the floor at this stage? So this does not to be the case. So then, once again, I would like to thank the Secretariat for this overview presentation. And with this distinguished delegate, I would like to turn my attention to item 5 of our agenda. At this stage, I would like to invite the ATT subsidiary bodies to give us their progress reports on their work. I will start with a voluntary trust fund. The chair of the Voluntary Trust Fund Selection Committee and the ATT Secretariat will give us a report on the status of operation of the Voluntary Trust Fund, including an update on Voluntary Trust Fund funded projects and applications received of the 2022 project cycle. So I now invite Ambassador Duncan, who will represent the head of the selection committee of the ATF, to join me. Hello. So Please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and good afternoon to all our colleagues. So it will be evident to all of you that I'm not Ambassador Del Higgy, and of course she is the chair of the Voluntary Trust Fund. It's my pleasure to give this statement on her behalf. It's the middle of the night in New Zealand, and I volunteered to do so. She is very much looking forward, of course, to chairing the selection committee process later this year, and so I will be providing this update in advance. At the outset, I wish to express New Zealand's sincere appreciation and thanks to Ambassador Goebel and the German delegation for their excellent leadership of our treaty this year. New Zealand would not be able to discharge its duties as chair of the Voluntary Trust Fund without the excellent support also of the ATT Secretariat or our colleagues on the selection committee. Every year, the Secretariat plays a pivotal role in liaising with those states that might wish to apply for a project under the fund. They ensure those states are well placed to make an application, and they work closely alongside states to understand their unique needs. After all of the applications are submitted, they collate, summarize, and make recommendations to the selection committee. This is a grueling task, and we all owe them a debt of gratitude in this regard. To our colleagues on the selection committee too, your wealth of experience and diverse perspectives contribute to strong decision-making, and we are encouraged by the participation in that process each year. Mr. President, the Voluntary Trust Fund is an incredible tool that we have at our disposal to translate the objectives of the treaty into reality. It can be accessed by states parties to assist them implement their treaty obligations. It can be accessed by state signatories to progress their ratification procedures, for example, to perform a legal gap analysis. And it also may be accessed by states that are seriously considering joining the treaty in the near future. For those states who are not yet party to the treaty, they will need to demonstrate serious political will to accede to the treaty. And often a VTF project will be precisely what is required to overcome some practical difficulty that state was having in joining the treaty. And there are several real and perceived barriers that can and do exist. New Zealand has served as chair of the Voluntary Trust Fund since the conclusion of the 5th Conference of States Parties in 2019. Over this time, we have been able to see firsthand the true value of the VTF to make a real-world difference in the implementation and universalization of our treaty, and to advancing the important objectives that underpin it. The fund remains in a healthy financial position, having received more than $10 million in voluntary contributions since it was established. 28 states have generously contributed over the life of the fund, and while we are pleased at the overall health of the fund, we cannot take this for granted. Over this period of time, more than $6 million has been applied across a diverse range of projects. Ongoing financial contributions from a diverse range of countries will continue to be critical to the sustainability and credibility of the VTF's work and our ability to advance the treaty's aims. Speaking briefly in my national capacity for a moment, this is why my government has been pleased to contribute to the fund over the course of its life. Mr. President, COVID-19 has had a prolonged and difficult impact on the VTF's funding cycles in 2020 and 2021. Projects have had to be redesigned. The delivery of projects has been reimagined away from in-person meetings. Deadlines were extended. The ability of the selection committee to meet in person was disrupted, and our ability to conduct outreach as chair has been significantly impeded. But it has not stopped our work, far from it. The head of the Secretariat, Mr. Dladla, will shortly provide you with a detailed update on the operation of the fund and implementation of projects across its breadths. But can I first say that, as chair, New Zealand has been encouraged to see that the vast majority of projects approved by the Selection Committee in 2019 and 2020 have been completed or are in an advanced stage. This has occurred in the face of significant challenges to our mode of operating over the past 2 years. This is a commendable achievement by those recipient states and their partner organizations. Our ability to hold in-person meetings has been significantly impaired since the onset of the pandemic, but we are hopeful that in 2022 we will be able to return to a model where outreach by the chair is possible to colleagues in New York and Geneva, including in the margins of the First Committee. As chair of the Selection Committee, New Zealand produced 3 instructional videos to assist states that are exploring an application to the VTF. The 3 videos are a good entry point for states looking to learn more about the VTF and our application procedures. They include several helpful tips, and we would refer all delegates to them. You can find them on the ATT website and in all UN languages. If you are a prospective applicant state or sponsor organization and you have any questions regarding the fund, we would encourage you to reach out early to the Secretariat or to the New Zealand delegation. We will be investigating what further outreach activities we can do in the lead up to this year's conference of states parties. Please let us know if your state would benefit from this so that we can ensure any outreach activity is responsive to the needs of states. For the forthcoming 2022 VTF cycle, we have once again received a large number of applications from states. We are encouraged by the level of commitment states are showing to better implement the Arms Trade Treaty. New Zealand expects to convene a session of the Selection Committee on the 19th of May this year to meet and discuss these applications. Can I thank those states in advance who have invested in the process of submitting an application to this round. Please allow me to hand now to Mr. Dladla to present on the fund's operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for giving me the opportunity, and thank you, Mr. President, again. Just to complement the statement already delivered by the chair of the VTF, I will therefore cover the operational aspects of the VTF in terms of financial status, the progress of projects, as well as give you a reflection of the applications that we have received to the 2022 project cycle. You will recall that the VTF was established by CSP2 in the year 2016. And since that time, since 2016, the VTF, as stated by the chair already, has received funding from quite a number of states. And we continue to be grateful to the donors to the VTF because they are actually making a contribution towards the viability of this important facility to support treaty implementation. I'll take a moment then to read the names of the states that have made or that are making contributions to the VTF. Starting with the first slide, of course, is Argentina, Australia, Austria, Bulgaria, Canada, Costa Rica, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Japan, Mexico, Montenegro. And on the next slide, we've got other states who have made contributions towards the VTF. And they are the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, the Philippines, Poland, Portugal, the Republic of Korea, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, UK, and the government of Flanders, Belgium. Mr. President, I want to indicate that on this slide, there are still some spaces for more flex. So we encourage more states to take up those positions. The next two slides would basically give you an actual breakdown of the actual contribution by each state. I am not going to be reading the actual contribution by each state, but the presentation will be available on the website for you to read the actual numbers. But these are the contributions that have been made by each state. But our calculation, therefore, is at the bottom of the slide, which is the slide that you have currently. This is the total contributions that we have received from VTF donors to projects. And the total amount of money that has been received at this point is 10.8 million. And that is a lot of money by our estimate. And we continue to be grateful then for states that have made these contributions. And we thank them sincerely for their generosity. In addition to the contributions that we have received towards the projects, two states have made contributions to something that we call the VTF outreach program. The chair has already indicated that the VTF outreach program is aimed at trying to promote the VTF so that we can get as many states to contribute to the VTF on the one hand, and as many states to apply for funding from the VTF as possible. So it plays a very important role in actually promoting the VTF. And two states have made contribution towards the money that we use for this outreach program, and that is Germany as well as New Zealand. The total contributions received from the two states then it's 70,000. But what you see then at the bottom is the total contributions that we have received, 10.8 million. And as I said, it is indeed a lot of money by our estimate. The money that we have received has therefore been deployed, which is what the purpose of these funds for. These funds have a purpose of being used to support treaty implementation at a national level. The slide that we have at the present moment indicates how the funds have been committed to projects. We have run already 5 project cycles, project cycle 2017, 2018, 19, 20, and 2021. And that indicates how these funds have been used. The total contribution therefore used is 6.2 million, which therefore leaves us with a balance of available funds of 4.5 million US dollars. Regarding the contributions to the VTF outreach program, and again, we have incurred expenditure in that regard, and we currently have 16.8 thousand that is available to us to further undertake activities of promoting the VTF. But I would wish then to go one slide back, just to make the point that has already been touched on by the statement by the chair, that we have a strong balance sheet at the present moment. We have in hand 4.5 million to support projects, and we predict that we are going to be financially viable for the next 2 to 3 years. And if you judge that by the current number of applications that we received per year, we are excited about that. However, we still need as much more money as possible so that our financial capacity can go beyond the 3 years that I'm currently predicting. The next few slides are dedicated towards providing a reflection of where we stand with the projects that have been supported by the VTF over the 5 years that we have been in operation. In 2017, as I had said, there was a first cycle that we had. We had 17 projects that were supported at that time. 2 of those projects were withdrawn by the applicants themselves or the states concerned, but 15 of them have been carried out by the states concerned, and activities have been completed, and those projects have been closed and properly accounted for. So we consider those to have been sealed and delivered in our instance, and those accounts are basically closed. That is 2017. And the same thing in 2018, my apologies for... 2018, the selection committee approved 10 projects, and out of the 10 that were approved, 1 was withdrawn by the state consent, and the other 9 then were undertaken and concluded in terms of activities and in terms of accounting. They were closed, and this is also a closed cycle. With respect to 2019, which is a 3rd project cycle, the VTF Selection Committee approved 20 projects, which is quite a big number. And one of out of the 20 projects, one project was withdrawn. And interestingly, at this point in time, we have completed 11 projects in this cycle. And 1 of them have been discontinued for various reasons. And 7 projects are currently underway. And maybe I need to take a moment to explain why we are saying probably 2019, almost 3 years down the line, we have not closed the cycle. It's because this cycle is a cycle that was affected by COVID, as explained by the chair already. When these projects were starting to take root in the year 2020, then COVID happened. And what COVID said is that, meant is that those projects had to be delayed. The activities were stopped. And they were renegotiated the terms because they couldn't undertake activities that were supposed to be undertaken. And they were to resume probably 6 years, 7 months, 8 months down the line. And that explains why these projects have not been concluded at this point in time. But the implication of COVID, therefore, to the capacity of the Secretariat is such that because projects have been delayed, it basically means that the new projects that are coming in are actually adding to the volume of work that we have to do. As opposed to managing 2 cycles of projects in a year, now you have to manage about 3 cycles, 2019, 2020, and 2021. And 2022 becomes, therefore, cycle number 4. That has got implications for capacity. And I think the selection committee is aware of that. We have made proposals to the selection committee regarding how to deal with the capacity implications of COVID, amongst other things. The 2020 projects, the selection committee approved 10 projects, and one of them was withdrawn, and 9 were carried forward, and 3 of them have been concluded, and 1 project have been discontinued, and 5 are underway. And again, these are 2020 projects, and they were also affected by COVID. For 2021, these were decisions made by a selection committee last year in May. So these projects are still pretty new in terms of activities, and we hope that they will be concluded during 2022 to 2023, depending on how the evolution of COVID happens. The final slide, Mr. President and Chair of the VTF, is a reflection on the applications that we have received towards the project cycle 2022. You'll be reminded that last year we issued a call for proposals in October, and states were given 3 months within which to submit their applications. And by the deadline of 14 January 2022, we had received 15 applications. And in terms of breakdown, out of the 15 applications that have been received, 11 of those applications are states parties. 1 of them is a signatory state, and one of them is also a state that has not joined the ATT. Basically meaning there are quite a number of states that are involved, but there are different categories of them. Basically, it's 15 projects received involving 13 states. Well, the difference between 15 and 13 is that some applications or some states have applied for more than one project. That accounts for the difference between 15 and 13. But if the projects that we are currently reflecting here are to be approved by the VTF, assuming that they are of a good standing, we would need to support them with an amount or the budget, which is about 1.3 million US dollars. So that is the amount of money that we require for that. But where are these applications coming from? The pie chart on the right of the slide indicates that the majority of the proposals that we have received, which we are going to consider, or the selection committee is going to consider, the majority of them, 11 of them are coming from the African region and 2 of them are coming from the Americas. So that is the spread of the current applications. Of course, as indicated, the selection committee would sit and consider these applications on the 19th of May, 2022. And that will determine then how many of the proposals will be taken forward as projects, because at the present moment they are proposals, and once they are approved and we have had agreement with them, they tend to become projects. Thank you so much, Mr. President and Chair of the Selection Committee, for giving me this opportunity. That is the status of the operations of the VTF. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Secretariat and also Ambassador Duncan for the report of the Chair of the VTF Selection Committee, and best regards to Ambassador Higi, and thanks to her for all the efforts and engagement. With this, I would like to open the floor now for delegations' views on the VTF report we've just heard by the Chair and the Secretariat. So the floor is open. So I give the floor to the delegate of Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Japan would like to thank chairs of the VTF Selection Committee and the Secretariat for your dedications to the work of the VTF. Japan also appreciates the efforts made by the states who are implementing these projects despite the challenging circumstances due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Japan hopes that all the ongoing projects will be properly implemented and contribute to the enhancement of their national capacities. The BTF is an important and effective framework for supporting ATT implementation through helping the establishment of the national control system and institutional capacity building. We also believe that it could be an incentive for non-state parties to join the treaty and an important tool to encourage universalization of the ATT. As a member of the VTF Selection Committee, Japan will continue to promote its value and utility to non-state parties. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Japan for her statement. And now I give the floor to Costa Rica. Please, Costa Rica, you have the floor.
Embajadora Duncan, muchas gracias por el informe. Es un placer escucharla en este segmento. Y al secretariado por habernos brindado el estado financiero del BTF y de los proyectos. A partir de la entrada en vigor del tratado, Costa Rica ha realizado lo posible por ir presentando avances significativos en su aplicación nacional, entre los que destacan la capacitación constante de funcionarios, más de 350 personas mediante programas de asistencia de la Unión Europea y del BTF, así como de eventos celebrados con la colaboración de la sociedad civil, en especial la Fundación Áreas para la Paz y el Progreso Humano. Igualmente, la adopción mediante decreto en el 2018 del Sistema Nacional de Control, en el 2019 la adopción de una lista nacional de control y el manual de procedimientos del Sistema Nacional. Si bien estas acciones gozan de reconocimiento, aún tenemos tareas pendientes por conseguir para el pleno funcionamiento del sistema. Para lograrlo, en ese sentido, el gobierno de Costa Rica solicitó el año pasado el financiamiento del BTF para desarrollar una plataforma digital que permita a la autoridad nacional operar los mecanismos y procedimientos del sistema, además de que aspiramos llegue a facilitar la coordinación aún más entre las entidades responsables en la autorización previa y durante las transferencias, así como la rendición de cuentas y seguimiento. La plataforma además sería un repositorio de todas las solicitudes, las que se encuentran en trámite y las concluidas, las autorizaciones y las denegaciones. Por lo tanto, concentrará la información base para la presentación del informe anual. Además de promover la aplicación nacional del tratado, la plataforma digital coadyuvará a lograr metas adicionales para mi país, como robustecer las estrategias amplias de eficiencia de los procesos públicos y la digitalización de la administración pública, explorar nuevas esferas como oferente de cooperación sur-sur con países que lo requieran, en la creación de capacidades especializadas, fortalecer una alianza estratégica entre entidades gubernamentales, instituciones educativas y sociedad civil, como lo que hoy el BTF nos está permitiendo realizar con jóvenes estudiantes y profesores de la Universidad Técnica Pública Costarricense, el Instituto Tecnológico. Con estas acciones, embajadora, además del compromiso de mi país con el tratado y el BTF, aspiramos a seguir teniendo el compromiso de mi país hacia un fin ulterior, que no es la de legitimar la creciente carrera armamentista y más bien la de coadyuvar a los esfuerzos globales para salvar vidas mediante un control auténtico del armamento convencional. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I thank the distinguished delegate of Costa Rica for this statement. And next on my list is El Salvador, followed by Mexico. So please, El Salvador, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente, por darme la palabra. Aprovecho esta oportunidad para hacer extensivo un cordial saludo de parte del gobierno de El Salvador. De igual manera, agradecer a los países donantes y al comité de selección por haber aprobado nuestro proyecto, el cual consiste en adquirir equipo para aumentar nuestras capacidades para el control y el registro de armas a nivel nacional. Finalmente, reiteramos que nuestro país está comprometido en el cumplimiento de las obligaciones adquiridas en este tratado. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of El Salvador for his statement, and now I give the floor to Mexico. So please, Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Quisiéramos también tomar esta oportunidad para felicitar al secretariado, agradecerle todos sus esfuerzos y reconocer el valor agregado que la presidenta del comité de selección ha traído a los trabajos del BTF. En particular, quisiéramos subrayar la importancia de los lineamientos que la presidencia del comité ha desarrollado para facilitar a los estados aplicar para el otorgamiento de recursos en apoyo a los distintos proyectos. Consideramos que estos esfuerzos generan ya una plataforma adicional brindando facilidades para los países interesados y seguramente pueden ayudar en el corto o mediano plazo a diversificar el origen regional de los proyectos. Finalmente, también un reconocimiento y agradecimiento a las aportaciones de los donantes y felicitar a los miembros del comité por su minucioso y arduo trabajo durante el examen y el seguimiento de los proyectos, tratando siempre de asegurar un impacto positivo a nivel nacional y regional. Gracias.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Mexico for his statement, and this concludes my list of speakers. So would any other delegation like to take the floor at that time? This does not seem to be the case. So once again, thank you very much, Ambassador Duncan, and thank you for the Secretariat for this report of the VTF Selection Committee. This brings me to the next working group, and I would like to invite the chair of the working group on effective treaty implementation, Ambassador Lim of the Republic of Korea, to give us his report of the working group, including its 3 sub-working groups. So please, Ambassador Lim, yes, if you join us. So, Ambassador Lim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking the 3 facilitators, Ambassador Sanchez of Spain, Mr. Wensley of South Africa, as well as the Ms. Petrovic of Serbia. Once again, they conducted their sessions in unusual circumstances with a reduced time frame, and I commend their effort, and also my thanks go to the Secretariat. Especially, I would also like to express my thanks to you, the participants, for your active and engaging participation in the meetings of the working group on effective treaty implementation. I am conscious that we are not making progress as rapidly as we might have originally anticipated when preparing the multi-year work plans. Nevertheless, each of the sub-working groups managed to cover most of their respective agendas and have taken forward the matters under review to the extent possible. I am going to give a very brief recap of the main points arising out of the sub-working group discussions, and then I'm going to talk about next steps in the process. First, in the meeting of the sub-working group on Articles 6 and 7, facilitated by Ambassador Sanchez of Spain, the facilitator provided a brief overview of the list of possible draft elements for Chapter 1 on key concept of the proposed voluntary guide to assist the state parties in implementing Articles 6 and 7. He prepared this based on the contributions received from state parties to the methodology template exercise undertaken during the last cycle and the views exchanged during the discussions held so far in the context of the meetings of the Ugeti sub-working group on Articles 6 and 7. During the open discussions that followed, delegations provided useful and detailed comments and suggestions on the draft text. These included providing further details of the background to the methodology exercise, including the number of states that responded to the methodology template, making clear the list of instruments highlighted in the text and derived from state parties' responses to the methodology template. They are indicative and not exhaustive and reflect the views of some state parties and do not represent the common understanding of all state parties, including languages that emphasize that it is not the aim of the chapter to reinterpret concepts that have established interpretations in international law, and reiterating that whilst the use of the guide under development may be voluntary, the international law reflected and listed in the guide is not. Facilitator then commenced the focused discussions on Article 6 obligations as contemplated in the multi-year work plan. Given the short amount of time left, only a few interventions were possible, and clearly further discussions on this topic will be needed during the April the working group the meetings. I commend the delegation of Switzerland for submitting detailed written comments in response to the 3 questions posed by the facilitator in this session, and I encourage other delegations to follow Switzerland's example in submitting written comment on this matter to the ATT Secretariat. This has the potential to advance our work on this topic during the intersessional period. In the meeting of the sub-working group on Article 9 facilitated by Mr. Rob Wensley of South Africa, the sub-working group on Article 9 focused on 2 preliminary topics: measures to regulate the transit and transshipment of arms by land, and measures to regulate the transshipment of arms by air. The aim of this discussion was to explore options and common practice for regulating the transit and transshipment of arms by land and air, and to hear from states what their efforts and experiences are. The facilitator emphasized that the discussion would hopefully enable the sub-working group to reach broad common understanding on certain terms and concepts contained in the ATT, which could form the basis of a future voluntary guide on the implementation of Article 9. Dr. Julia Honig, assistant professor at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam, gave a kickoff presentation on transport and transit of arms by road and air. The presentation was delivered with a view to helping delegations understand the existing international and regional laws and regulations relevant to this topic. The facilitator steered the discussions using as a guide the questions included in the background paper prepared for the meeting. The questions were designed to elicit information on national approaches to monitoring and controlling the transport of arms over land and by air. We heard many detailed accounts of national practice, especially from states in Africa and particularly the ECOWAS region, where much attention has been paid to the issue of transit of small arms and light weapons through ECOWAS countries, and a prohibition on such transit is included in the ECOWAS Convention. Participants gave examples of their national legislation and regulations that specifically apply to the transit and transshipment of restricted goods, such as arms and military goods, and the additional controls that apply to such goods. They also described the exemptions that apply in certain circumstances, including those that apply in regional context and where arms are transferred temporarily or for military operations. They explored some of the challenges and complexities faced with respect to the controlling goods in transit, including deviations in the route that transport takes that may become necessary if there is some kind of emergency, and also the paperwork involved in transporting items and the fact that the cargo may be traveling across several countries and custom agents may not be able to read the language that the paperwork associated with the cargo is in. In the meeting of the sub-working group on Article 11, facilitated by Ms. Stella Petrovic of Serbia, the meeting began with an overview by the facilitator of her draft background paper on the role of transit and transshipment state in preventing diversion, which draws on the paper titled Possible Measures to Prevent and Address Diversion, welcomed by the first conference of state parties as a starting point for considering the measures that can be taken by governments of transit states to prevent and address diversion. In the exchanges that followed, participants reflected on complementarity of the topic being addressed in the sub-working group and the sub-working group on Article 9, noting that a joint session between the 2 sub-working groups might be useful. This is in fact the already contemplated in the final session of the multi-year work plan of the sub-working group on Article 9, which will look at the relationship between Article 9 and other articles. Many transit states, including several landlocked states, shared information on the measures they take to control arms in transit, noting the important role of custom agencies in this endeavor. They explore the difficulties in control transit through the airspace versus land, where it is much harder to intercept air cargo. Some states explain they treat the arms as dangerous goods for the purposes of air transport, giving them great opportunity to control their movement. In the context of information exchange, the need for timely provision of information was emphasized. One state suggested that it would be useful to have a list of the entities in different states that are responsible for issuing important export licenses, as well as end-user certificates within the framework of the ATT. This would facilitate direct contact with these agencies and better state cooperation. It is also noted that ATT national point of contact could play a role in sharing information on these matters, and that the Divergent Information Exchange Forum has important work to do in this area. The importance of interagency cooperation at the domestic level and the need for mapping or oversight of which agencies are involved in transit controls was emphasized. Some states also gave examples of case studies and national experiences where they denied the transit of arms through their territory based on risk assessment, conducted and effective control measures in place, noting the need for follow-up and continued engagement to prevent divergent attempts. They also noted the importance of fulfilling UN Security Council the arms embargoes to prevent diversion of arms in transit, while they also highlighting the challenges many transit states face in terms of the resources needed to implement transit control measures at border crossings. States also discussed their national compliance measures for transport operators and systems for qualifying transport operators and freight forwarders to transport arms. The need to engage transport actors and providers in diversion prevention measures was emphasized. Regarding the next steps, we will, in collaboration with facilitators, consider all the suggestions and broader discussions arising from the sub-working groups. Our plan is then to the following. In the context of sub-working group on Article 6 and 7, the facilitator will take into consideration the comments and suggestions on the list of possible draft elements for Chapter 1 of the proposed voluntary guide, and will prepare a revised draft of the chapter. Delegations are invited to submit any further comments in writing. The facilitator will also continue the discussions on Article 6 obligations, as there was insufficient time to contemplate these discussions this week. All delegations are encouraged to submit responses to the questions posed by the facilitator in writing to the ATT Secretariat to accelerate the work on this topic. With respect to the sub-working group on Article 9, the facilitator will begin preparations for a more in-depth look at the measures to regulate the transit and transshipment of arms by sea, which will be the focus of the next meeting of the sub-working group. In the context of sub-working group on Article 11, the facilitator will begin preparations for the discussions on the third and final stage of the transfer chain, which is at or after importation and post-delivery, which is the final topic on the sub-working group's multi-year plan. and which will be covered in the next meeting of the working group on Article 11 in April. With that, I thank you all once again for your contributions and suggestions to our discussions, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in April in person. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ambassador Lim. I would like to thank you for the support, as I think also the facilitators of the working group of effective treaty implementation, Ambassador Sanchez de Lerin from Spain, Mr. Rob Wensley from South Africa, and Stella Petrovic from Serbia. With this, I would like to open the floor now for delegations' views on the report of the working group of effective treaty implementation. So the floor is open. So no, we have, I don't know. Okay. I just realized that I have a very bad side. So please, Georgia, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you, Mr. President, for providing me with opportunity to share my opinion with you. I also want to thank Ms. Alison Pitlock for a very interesting intervention. I mean, yesterday's session. While implementing the ATT obligations, I would like to focus more on the GBV criteria, because as a licensing officer, I think that it's a very accountable and important criteria in the process of issuing any kind of license or permit. It's worth to take into account the reports of non-governmental organizations and officially published statistics of the authorized agencies. It's important to assess the GBV risk in the destination country. I also think that to reduce and eradicate the effects of GBV, main task of states is to increase awareness about gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate, Georgia, for this statement. Would any other delegation like to take the floor this time? So this does not seem to be the case, so I would like to thank once more Ambassador Lim, the chair of the Working Group of Effective Treaty Implementation, for his report. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting, Mr. Wene Wisser of the Netherlands and Ms. Rizal Rodriguez of Panama, to give us their report. So please join us on the podium. I don't know who wants to start, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. The co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting would like to commend you, Mr. President, and the ATT Secretariat for this series of successful hybrid meetings that have helped us progress the work in spite of the COVID pandemic. We also congratulate all participants for the high level of participation, discussion, and engagement. We are pleased to report on the status of discussions during the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. On the 17th of February, the Working Group held its meeting as part of the preparatory process to the 8th Conference of State Parties. As the first point on the agenda, the Working Group reviewed the status of reporting through a presentation by the ATT Secretariat. The presentation demonstrated that despite some progress made since the last update on the status of reporting, for example, on more timely reporting and in updating initial reports, Many of the states parties are not in compliance with their reporting obligation under Article 13 of the ATT. The decrease in annual reporting is still continuing and remains a serious cause of concern. In addition, the growing trend of making reports available only to states parties continues to pose challenges to the treaty's objective of transparency. Many participants reaffirmed the importance of transparency and reporting as key elements for confidence building among states parties and acknowledged the need to ensure the quality of the reporting. Some participants made a call for the timely submission of reports. In addition, one participant encouraged states parties to use the online reporting tool. Several participants expressed concerns regarding the low rates of reporting, and there were various calls to states parties to hand in missing reports and to make reports publicly available. Some participants also drew attention to the lack of updated initial reports given the obligations that states parties have to report to the ATT on any new measures to implement the treaty. One state party informed the working group about the submission of its initial report and the upcoming submission of its first annual report, and welcomed the timely translation of the reporting templates which facilitated these efforts. Several delegations urged the working group to explore further synergies between the ATT reporting and the reporting to the UN Register on Conventional Arms. One participant also informed the working group about national efforts to improve the quality in its national reporting. Another participant informed the working group about the reasons for the delay in the submission of its annual reports over the last 2 years and reassured that these outstanding reports will be submitted. The co-chairs pointed to the deadline for submitting the annual report on the 31st of May this year and called on all states parties to make the appropriate efforts to fulfill their reporting obligations, to do so publicly and by using the revised reporting templates endorsed at CSP7. Regarding the second item on the agenda, challenges concerning reporting, the co-chairs invited participants to share any challenges they are facing in submitting timely and accurate initial and annual reports. Furthermore, the co-chairs acknowledged the efforts of the previous CSP presidencies to engage bilaterally with states parties that are in arrears with reporting obligations. Thirdly, participants were asked to share on events and activities regarding reporting that they had organized. Finally, the ATT Secretariat presented a set of proposed amendments to the frequently asked questions type document, which resulted inter alia from the new reporting templates which were adopted at CSP7. Participants also were given the opportunity to suggest additional questions and answers to the guidance document. The proposed amendments put forward by the co-chairs to the frequently asked question type document enjoyed broad support among participants of the working group. Several participants offered further suggestions and amendments which will be considered in the next draft of the document. One participant recalled its reservation voiced at CSP7 to the revised reporting templates and urged for caution in proceeding with this exercise. Co-chairs will follow up with that delegation bilaterally. Several participants expressed their hopes that the peer-to-peer project of voluntary practical bilateral and regional assistance with reporting would be taken up again following the lifting of COVID restrictions. Another delegation welcomed the ongoing project of the ATT Secretariat, financed by the European Union, to provide capacity building support to the ATT national points of contact in order to inter alia fulfill their reporting obligations. The first meeting of the national points of contact took place last Monday. Under the agenda item substantive reporting and transparency issues, the co-chairs invited the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom to share its views on how gender considerations could be incorporated in the reporting practices by states parties. In addition, participants were given the general opportunity to raise any substantive issues regarding reporting that could benefit from consideration by the working group. Several participants supported the efforts of the co-chairs to integrate a gender perspective and welcomed the opportunity to exchange views on how gender and transparency can be further included in the work of the working group. One participant welcomed the efforts of the working group to put in evidence the correlation between illicit trafficking and the diversion of arms and the rates of armed violence, in particular gender-based violence, and to adopt a holistic approach in the reports. Another participant recalled that gender was identified as a priority issue in past CSPs, which deserves follow-up. Another participant considered that more work is needed on data collection regarding gender and gender-based violence at the national level, and that this information can contribute to the discussions on including GBV and ATT reports. One participant encouraged states parties to include information on gender aspects, even if it is not formally requested within the templates, and shared information about efforts and projects to implement the commitments on GBV made at CSP5. One delegation urged the working group to continue to expedite the work on introducing specific custom codes under the harmonized system of the World Customs Organization. Co-chairs will consider how to take this topic further and invited all states parties to explore ways and options to include gender consideration in their ATT reports. Under the agenda item 4, related to organizational means for information exchange, participants were provided the opportunity to propose and discuss structured mechanisms, processes, and formats facilitating the information exchange that are required or encouraged by the treaty, both on the policy level as well as on the operational level. The co-chair strongly encouraged state parties and signatory states to register online for the access to the restricted area of the ATT website and for access to the IT platform. Secondly, the chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum provided an update on the organization of the inaugural meeting of the forum. The chair voiced regret that the DIF has not been able to take place due to the COVID pandemic. The chair informed participants that the first meeting of the forum will take place as soon as meetings in person and with broad participation of states parties experts can be accommodated. Several participants voiced their support for the DIF as a useful tool to fight the diversion of conventional arms and expressed their hopes that the first meeting of the DIF will take place soon. One delegation called on the co-chairs and participants to make more intensive use of the IT platform to prepare for meetings and have more exchanges between the meetings in the CSP cycle. Another delegation made a proposal to facilitate the use of the IT platform. Finally, the participants discussed the reporting and transparency functionalities of the IT platform. States parties were given the opportunity to address any problems and/or inconveniences that they experience using the information exchange platform or using the online reporting tool. The co-chairs noted that the use of the IT platform for information exchange remains modest and encouraged states parties to use it more widely for the exchange of information. A representative of the European External Action Service presented the COARM searchable online database in order to inform the discussion regarding such a database in the ATT context. The co-chairs noted that the establishment of such a database requires a long-term approach with careful consideration to stakeholders' expectations and of course also to the cost and benefits of investing in such an instrument. To this end, participants of the working group were encouraged to reflect on the question posed in the non-paper for the April meetings in 2021 on the scope and parameters for such a database in the ATT context and share their views in writing or through the online information exchange system. Several delegations offered support to establishing an online database as a way of enhancing transparency in the ATT and provided feedback concerning the desired parameters of such a database. For example, one delegation noted that this project should not lead to an obligation on states parties to use the reporting templates agreed in previous CSPs. Delegation also called for further discussions on the cost-benefit of such a database and its differentiation from existing databases on arms exports. The co-chairs will reflect on how to take this topic further and will report back in due course. In closing, we would like to thank all participants for their engagements in the discussion of the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Would like to thank the co-chairs of the working group on transparency and reporting for their report. And with this, I would open the floor for delegations' views on the report. So please, the floor is open. Okay. So this does not seem to be the case. So once again, thank you very much for this report. And this brings us directly to the working group on treaty universalization. And I would like to invite the co-chair of this working group, the ambassador of Sierra Leone, Lansana Gebri, to join me in presenting the report of the working group. I don't see him yet. Okay, so he's not in the room. So then I will start. We had planned that I will, at the beginning of the meeting, as I already said at the beginning of the meeting, I would brief about the universalization efforts of the German presidency since it's coming into office in September. Ambassador Gebri would give an update of his efforts since he came into since last year's CSP7. So I will start with the efforts of the German presidency. So we have undertaken a range of activities related to treaty universalization. It started with facilitating the preparation and processing of the 2021 ATT resolution during the first committee of the United Nations General Assembly, for which 151 states voted in favor with no votes against it. The results in the General Assembly even surpassed this with 160 votes in favor and no votes against the resolution. We see this as a strong political support, a strong signal and political support for the treaty, but we are cognizant that we need to keep up the momentum to reach out to those states that abstained. So let me now turn to the aspects that guided us during the decision-making regarding geographical focus of the universalization efforts of this presidency. When thinking back at CSP7, you will recall the geographical representation of ATT state parties. There are some regions not well represented in the ATT yet, for example, the MENA region or Asia Pacific. And so we decided to focus on the Asia Pacific region during the CSP8 cycle. At the same time, we did not want to leave other regions aside and had a look at the signatories that might need a bit of support for the finalization of their ratification processes. In the end, we reached out to 17 countries on 3 continents through demarches of our embassies and with the help of quite a number of ATT state parties and the European Union. This in itself is an example for the states parties' willingness to universalize the ATT. Furthermore, the démarches have shown a very good team spirit amongst the diplomatic missions of the ATT states parties abroad. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank all missions that supported us in this first round of démarches. It may look like a coincidence, but I don't want to connect our démarche with the conclusion of the internal decision by the Philippines. I know this process took much more time, but it's with great pleasure that we now welcome the Philippines as a new member in the ATT family. We are looking forward to working with you closely and build on the specific regional expertise of this new member state. The example of the Philippines may serve also as an encouragement for other signatory states to join soon. I will just carry on and would look back briefly to our exchanges we had the day before yesterday in the working group of treaty universalization. I have to admit I was encouraged by the numerous interventions showing the broad engagement by member states and civil society for universalizing the ATT. As the increase in membership has slowed down continuously during the past years, we are certainly not allowed to scale down our efforts, and the working group on universalization is more important than ever, and providing the platform for exchange and coordination and preparing the grounds for more states becoming a member state. It was addressed quite rightly that we need political will for this, political will that may be achieved through positive examples, through a network or fabric of contacts from various institutions, organizations, and through the active promotion of the treaty by us, the states party of the ATT. In this regard, it is very encouraging that the working group on treaty universalization received the confirmation by the Gambia to accede to the treaty in the very near future, and the already mentioned announcement by the Philippines that the national ratification process has been finished and that they are preparing to become a state party very soon. So with this brief remarks, I would like to conclude, and I would open the floor for delegations' views on the report of the working group on treaty universalization. So please, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, the floor is open. This does not seem to be the case, so then thank you very much. In this, then I would directly come to the next report, and as indicated to the beginning, at this stage I would like to invite the head of the ATT Secretariat to give us an overview presentation on the status of ATT finances, including the ATT sponsorship program. That's the agenda item 5E that we just added to our agenda at the beginning of the meeting. So please, Mr. Dadler, I would like to invite you to give us the report.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. As directed by the President, I would take this moment to provide an overview of the status of ATT finances, as we normally do in meetings of this nature. You will know that the ATT financial management is guided by very specific rules or provisions coming out of the ATT financial rules, and specifically article or rule number 5 and 6 are very key in the formula that we use to calculate our contributions. But of course, there are also considerations that we take into account in the formula, and those would include aspects like the number of states that are in attendance at any meeting, number of states parties, as well as the UN scale of assessment, which is very important in assessing the extent of the contribution by each state. And the scale of effort or scale of the ambition that we want to adopt as a ATT is also important, because that determines the activities that we plan for any financial year. The ATT process, or the ATT Secretariat and all its activities derives its revenue from contributions by states that are participating in the process. We do not have any other financial stream other than assessed contributions. Of course, the other work streams are for voluntary contributions to the VTF and sponsorship programs. Those are voluntary for a particular purpose. But for the operations of the Secretariat itself, in respect of its core mandate, we are funded by contributions by states. The financial management process of the ATT is again informed by the provisions of the financial rules. But the important aspects to highlight over here is that on a yearly basis, we are required to issue invoices in October according to a relevant rule. And also, those invoices are therefore payable within 3 months, normally from October, and they are payable by January of the following year. And we send reminders under the signature of the President in every March, and we will be doing so this year. And we post the status of contributions to the ATT website. And the latest status of contributions on the website, I think it was some few days early 5th or so of February, accounting for the end of January, which was the deadline by which contributions to the 2022 were supposed to be paid. CSP7 took decisions with regard to finances, and I've already indicated this during my first presentation regarding the status of implementation of decisions taken by the CSP. One financial decision taken by CSP, the previous one, was the adoption of the budget for this year, which is 2022. And two, there was also the adoption of the guidelines to support, to assist states in applying for financial arrangements with the Secretariat under Rule 81D of the financial rules. But where do we stand at the present moment? I must say that as we are moving to the right, the slide becomes a little bit packed. We have had now 7 financial years from 2015 to 2022. So we have had 3 financial years to go through. But my focus today will not be all the other years. I will highlight certain facts about that, but my main focus is about the 2022 status. And what we see, therefore, is that against the budget approved by the Conference of States Parties last year, we have received a budget at this point, which is currently standing at 78%. On the far right of the slide, it indicates there that percentage of budget received. It's 78% at this point in time. And we are happy about that, but not too happy because we still have contributions that are outstanding. In the current year, we still have outstanding contributions of 251,000, which is a lot of money. But interestingly, when you look at that figure of, for instance, the figure of contributions received, 78%, and you look at the number of states that have made that figure to be possible, it's basically about 40% of the states. The last line says 40.1. It basically says the majority of, or some states have not yet paid. And the states that have paid are those who are making the big contributions, and therefore they are able to sustain the process. But others, they could be making smaller contributions, but those contributions are not forthcoming. And that is what is making the problem there to be so evident. And I always highlight the bottom, the orange line at the bottom of the page, and that is a contribution that we get from Switzerland, and we continue to be grateful to the Swiss government for making contributions to supporting the work of the ATT by supporting the ATT Secretariat key activities like offices, furniture, and fax machine and the like. And I think that is something that we are grateful for. Because had it not been for the contribution that Switzerland makes, I think the quantum of the contribution by each state would be higher. But it is at the current level because of that contribution. The next slide looks at the contributions that are outstanding, and we've indicated that in red. You will see that for over the 7-year period, we are accumulating unpaid contributions from the first year, 64,000, right up to 2022, where we are still standing at 251,000. And the total budget, or total amount of money that we still have to get from states at this point, it's almost 700,000, and that is not a good position. This is not a good balance sheet. We are accumulating deficit, and this organization is if there's no change in direction, is heading for very difficult times. But the contributions that are outstanding, we indicate at the bottom of the slide the number of states that still have to make their contributions. For 2022, we are still being owed by 76 states. That is quite a number, and for the previous year, 39 states are still in arrears. And you apply the same logic moving backward. But that's quite a number of states that are still owing the ATT contributions. Hence, therefore, the red lines that are indicating that we are heading for a difficult moment. The entries at the top of the line are entries that we have put here just to indicate how much money we have received or contributions we have received since the last time that we made the presentation on finances during CSP7. So you'll see therefore that for 2015-16, from August last year to date, we only got outstanding contribution of 373.35. In 2017, we got nothing. For 2018, we got 400,000. 2019, it's better, it's 14,900. And 2020, 9,000. And 2021, 26,000. So we are not putting, including 2022, because it's a recent, the deadline for the contributions was January. But what it shows is that the extent to which states are moving towards making good of their outstanding contributions is quite slow. It's just very, 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 very slowly. We put the slide here as an implication for non-payment because it's important for us to make this visible to states and other stakeholders, that there are implications for non-payment. You recall that CSP5 had reaffirmed the application of the Financial Rule 8.4. That basically says we have to ensure that at the end of every financial year, when we are closing our accounts, we are able to roll over uncommitted balance of appropriation, which is equivalent to cash and deficits. And again, part of that decision was that of CSP5 was that the rollover of balance of total credits due for the previous years when the rollover was not effected, we needed to pay those states back in a period of 5 years. And we have acted we have acted according to that directive of CSP5. And at this point, I am happy to report that against the 5 years that were given to pay back the money for the accrued credits for other states, we have paid 3 years already, but we still have 2 years to go. So we are still owing those states, and we are going to make good of this in the next 2 years. But the last bullet here is about the implication of the deficit that we are accumulating. On average, we are accumulating a deficit of annually of 7%. But if that 7% does not come through, it basically means, therefore, that it goes to the next year. It builds up over time. But the implication, therefore, is that in the medium to long term, we'll start to get into a financial crunch. And financial crunch implications are that if we are not liquid, we may not be able to support meetings in terms of interpretation, in terms of meeting venues, in terms of translations. And two, we may not be able to support the staff that is working for the Secretariat because they are part of the cost drivers of the ATT Secretariat. So that is the implication of it. But again, the long-term implication of that is that if those operations start to suffer, the ATT process itself, treaty implementation, advancing that, will be also affected. But that is the implication of non-payment. We just want to underscore that point, that we are heading towards difficult times, and we can still avoid that if there is going to be a change in the manner in which states are conducting their financial affairs. CSP5 also established a reserve fund, and the reserve fund, since it was established, has never received any contribution towards it. It still sits at a zero account. Well, if you have an account in a bank, there are administration costs. They are very negligible, but we're registering that we have to keep that account going, so we pay bank charges for that, just to keep the account open. In terms of percentage, just to reflect in a summary fashion, how do we compare the contributions that we received this year against those that we've received in the previous years? The thick red line is indicative of our CSP or of 2022 contributions. So what you see is that is a normal trend. The trend is the same. States that are paying continue to pay. Those that are not paying continue not to pay. That is basically the message and the observation that we are basically making. And once you reach the 93%, you can't go beyond that because over the 7 years, we are accumulating a deficit of 7%. So the message I'm conveying to this meeting is that the pattern of payment has not changed from last year. States that are paying continue to pay, and those who are not paying continue not to do so. The cash flow projection that we put over here is just to indicate how do we see our activities in the year ahead. I think when you're doing cash projections, there are basically two elements that are important. One is planned activities for a period, and two is projected expenditure over that period of time against the activities to be undertaken. And when you do that, recognizing that there are two cost drivers for the Secretariat, main cost drivers. One, as I had said, is meetings, including translation, interpretation, and the like. And two is staff cost. Those are the main cost drivers. And what we are indicating over there is that when we take the amount of money that we have received at this point in time, and we project that over time, we see that the money that we have received is going to sustain us until October. And after October, we will not be able to go until the end of the year. That is if we do not get additional contributions at this point in time. And of course, then it would be a crisis period if at that time we did not get sufficient money to keep the operations going until the end of the year. Mr. President, I'll take the moment again to just quickly go to the ATT sponsorship program, just to indicate the status over there. But I must say, the sponsorship program is different from the other finances I was talking about, because sponsorship program is voluntary, and it has been put in place in order to support participation and broaden participation in these kind of meetings by supporting states to come to meetings to participate. We have received funding from voluntary contributions from the states that are listed on the board towards the sponsorship program. And again, I take the moment to read them out. Is Australia, Canada, Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, Portugal, Republic of Korea, Switzerland, and Sweden. So the total, and again, there are some empty spaces there that can still be taken up. The contributions total received at this point, we are happy to, it's 924 contributions received. We are getting closer to 1 million since the sponsorship program was established. And we have spent the money. We have to spend the money according to the plans that we have. We spent 200,000 in the cycle 2019 to support 58 delegates. In the following year, we spent 73,000 to support 23 delegates. But of course, then because of that, we had COVID coming in, and participation in meetings was no longer possible, and meetings could not take place in person. So there was we couldn't have meetings where people can come and participate. And in 2021, the only cost that we incurred was administration cost. We have to pay audit cost to support our internal controls and accounting that we were required to do. But for the sponsored delegates that we have brought to town for these meetings, I must say we brought in a fair number of delegates here for this meeting. That was our plan, 16 delegates brought in. Of course, some of them could not come through. I think a few of them could not come through simply because of difficulties of traveling. Some of them could not, they just fell along the way. But we had a fair number, over 10 delegates that had come to these meetings, and I'm happy to see them present over here. And we had put aside 55,000 to support them for that. Our plan is to have a similar number for April meetings, as well as double the number for CSP8. And so we are hoping to have 32 to 35 delegates supported for CSP8. So, Mr. President, this brings me then to the end of this overview. There are a lot of points to talk about, but this is just an overview. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the Secretariat for this overview. I'm very glad that you finished up with the sponsorship program. It gives a more optimistic note because indeed the report of the financial situation is indeed quite worrisome, I would say, and I can just call on all member states to make their outstanding contributions in time, and also to make full use of the system set up by CSP7 to take care of their arrears. I think our meeting this week has showed that there is a strong commitment for the treaty, but I think we have to make sure that this strong commitment is also reflected in financial contributions. But so with just a view on the time, I will open the floor, and please, I would like to invite delegations to express their views on this report we've just heard. So please, the floor is open. I see the delegation of the United Kingdom, so please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to you and all the team for the work that you've all done this week. Let me take the opportunity also to thank the chairs of the working groups for their presentations earlier. If my delegation didn't intervene then, it wasn't through any lack of interest, but because their reports were very thorough and a very good account of the hard work that's been done this week. So my thanks to them as well. I'm very grateful to our Secretary for his presentation just then, but it is, as you said, worrisome. I am concerned both at the slow pace of payments for this year, which, as our Secretary pointed out, will land us in trouble come the autumn if it's not taken care of. But I have to say I'm even more alarmed about the accumulated arrears that we saw on the screen, over $250,000. This is not sustainable, Mr. President. We cannot maintain our treaty if we are accumulating these sorts of arrears 7 years into the life of the treaty. Our Secretary talked about difficult times. I interpret that to mean bankruptcy. Let us be clear, if we do not clear these arrears, our treaty will be bankrupt. There will be no meetings, there will be no secretariat, there will be no support for implementing and strengthening our treaty. That is unacceptable, Mr. President, and I think the states that have not paid, and it looked like there were about 20 or so in any given year, and more last year, who have not paid, need to take a very close look, I think, at the figures that we've been presented with today. It's a very, very alarming prospect, and I would urge all states to look at them very carefully and to settle their arrears very quickly. I'm also concerned, I have to say, Mr. President, after the huge effort that went in over the last 2 years to agree the mechanism for instituting payment plans to clear arrears, that not one state has yet taken up that mechanism. This mechanism was designed to help. It was designed to help states who are in genuine difficulty to rectify the situation. And I would, again, strongly urge all states who are more than 2 years in arrears to avail themselves of that mechanism and to take steps to clear their arrears as soon as possible. Otherwise, we're going to be facing an extremely serious situation very soon. I can't underline that enough. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Ambassador of the United Kingdom for his statement. Is there any other delegation like to take the floor at this time? So this does not seem to be the case. So, but yes, I think that's an issue which we will have to follow up very, very closely, and we will take this up again at the next PrepCon meeting, and it will certainly also a point on when it comes to the CSP8. And that brings me directly to our last agenda item, with your permission, distinguished delegate.
Chair,
Sorry?
with your permission, I raise my hand.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
It's Gambia. Gambia, please.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so you want to speak to the last agenda item?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Yes.
So please, Gambia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, all of you, the Secretariat, and the chairs of the working group for the work done during this week. Gambia, we are pleased for the recognition that all the member states have given us the encouragement to accede to the ATT. We are happy for the support. Thank you very much under your leadership. We would also like to add our voice to the call to stand by the Secretariat and call on countries to fulfill their financial obligations. And then we also would like to thank the donors to the sponsorship program. Keep it up. We are encouraged, and we encourage you to keep on funding the sponsorship program. We would also like to thank Switzerland for being there for the operations of the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Gambia, and apologies for not overseeing you. So once more, I ask the question: would any delegation would like to take the floor at this time? Okay, so we don't have anything. Okay, so then I move on to, as I already said, to agenda item 6, which is the consideration of the CSP8 draft agenda. As it has become customary, draft agenda items for a forthcoming CSP are first introduced at the informal preparatory meeting of the CSP. Accordingly, you will find in your package of documents for today the draft agenda for the CSP8 meeting. These draft agenda items were prepared in accordance with the requirements of Article 17 and Rule 15 of the ATT Rules of the Procedure. The draft agenda items reflect items agreed upon by conference in previous sessions, and are consistent with agenda items of previous CSPs. So with this, I hope you have duly taken note of this draft agenda, which was distributed ahead of this session, and I would like to open the floor for giving you an opportunity to express your views on the draft agenda items for the CSP8 meeting. So the floor is open. Okay, so this does not seem to be the case, at least at this stage. So then, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of this informal preparatory meeting. Do you have it? Okay. Oh, I've just informed there is one. Okay, we have just one delegation, it's Control Arms, who is asking for the floor. So, okay, Control Arms, you have the floor, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I am Cesar Jaramillo. I'm the Executive Director of Project Plowshares based in Canada, but I am speaking today in my capacity as Chair of the Control Arms Coalition. Control Arms would like to thank the CSP8 presidency, the working group chairs and facilitators, the ATT Secretariat, and all of the states parties that took the time to prepare for this week's working group sessions. Over the course of the past 3 days, we have been encouraged by what seems to be a renewed willingness of states parties from all regions of the world to engage substantively in addressing critical and persistent challenges related to the international arms trade. These include poorly regulated transit and transshipment of arms, the potential for diversion, and the need for comprehensive arms export risk assessment. We welcome this opportunity to submit comments and suggestions regarding the draft agenda for CSP8. Today, I would like to focus on a single suggestion, one that has been presented by Control Arms, by the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and by other civil society organizations at CSP7. And that is to add to the annual CSP agenda a standing item or a special session that would gauge progress on the thematic focus areas of each preceding CSP cycle. The purpose of this recurring agenda item or special session would be on an annual basis to take stock of progress achieved against the recommendations presented by each of the former CSP presidencies, as well as any corresponding commitments agreed to by states parties in the CSP final reports each year. If time is not set aside year after year to discuss the progress made on the various thematic focus commitments, there is a clear danger that with every new theme, states parties will lose momentum on the important work that has already been completed in prior years. In preparation for this agenda item or special session, Control Arms encourages states parties with input from all ATT stakeholders to develop clear strategies and mechanisms for ensuring that the outcomes related to each CSP thematic focus become the basis for concrete action into the future. As a start, Control Arms, with support from Canada, is developing a methodology for tracking progress with the gender and gender-based violence recommendations set out in the CSP5 final reports. With more focused stakeholder engagement on each of these thematic issues, in particular on gender and gender-based violence, together we can work to enhance international and regional peace, security, and stability, promote cooperation, transparency, and responsible action by states parties, and reduce human suffering. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Control Arms for his statement. This now brings us indeed to our last agenda item. So conclusion of this meeting. As I said, we are very well in time, and we have now reached the end of this CSP8. Another one. Okay, but with this I close the okay. We have another demand for the floor. So please, with this, then I would close the list of speakers, but I will give the floor to the Women's League for Peace and Freedom. So please, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much for giving us the floor again. We would just like to express support to the suggestion from Control Arms to add to the annual CSP agenda a standing item or a special session that would gauge progress on the thematic focus areas of each preceding CSP cycle. We agree with Control Arms that there is a risk of losing momentum on the work that has already been completed in prior years. And sometimes CSP adopted outcomes are taken up within the ATT working groups, but others are not. And sometimes it can be challenging to stay on top of the status of past agreements. And in this vein, WILF takes note of taking stock of the Arms Trade Treaty briefing paper series published by CIPRI in 2021. The 6 papers present a lot of good content and food for thought for the work of this community going forward. Also, there had been an earlier suggestion that taking stock of ATT achievements would also be a thematic focus in the CSP8 meeting cycle. It was also referenced by a couple of delegations, but we did not hear the president mention it. While it's not clear if this is still the case, WILF continues to encourage stock taking either as an explicit focus of the conference or as a general approach to guide our work. And finally, we wish to thank the CSP8 presidency, the working group chairs and facilitators, the ATT secretariat, and all of the states parties for their time and contributions to this week's working group sessions, which we feel have been very content rich and highly substantive. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate of the Women's League for international peace and freedom. That the German saying that you need three tries, 3 attempts to make things work. So I tried for the third time to conclude our meeting. I think this time it will work. So excellences, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we now have really reached the end of the CSP informal meeting, and I think we have listened to the views and comments of delegations, and I would like to thank everyone for their contributions and interventions. And in the days ahead, the vice presidents, the chairs and facilitators of the ATT subsidiary bodies, the ATC secretariat, and myself, I will carefully consider the inputs received from this meeting and to the extent possible take them on board. We look forward to your further participation in the second CSP8 preparatory meetings scheduled, as you know, to take place over the period 26 to 28 of April 2022. The logistical details of the April ATT meetings will communicate it to you in due course. I just can say that I personally, but I think we all hope that that we will be able to organize then this second week as an in-person meeting, which will allow us to have more time and more possibilities to exchange. So with this, I would once again like to thank the Secretariat for the organization of this meeting, the interpreters for their excellent work, and all of you for participating in the CSP8 informal preparatory meeting. And I wish you a restful weekend. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.